world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
Welcome to the Warrior Parent Podcast. My name is Marci Mitchell. I'm so glad that you joined us today. Today, we are speaking with Mandi Pratt, who is a trained domestic violence victim advocate, a self-defense teacher, a podcaster, and a professional speaker. She has a crazy life story that was in the news, and she now helps audiences avoid her own experience. Mandi empowers others to become their own heroes with resilience and improved mental well-being to enjoy a safer, more peaceful future. Welcome, Mandi.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're thrilled to have you here.
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to speak to Mandi today. We had a conversation, I don't know, a month or so ago, talking a little bit about her work and the important work that she's doing. And I have some relation around what she's gone through. So a lot of this feels near and dear to my heart. So without further ado, Mandi, I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about your big story and how you came to be, as you call it, the badass that you are.
Thank you. Well, I remember the day that it all kind of came to a point where I knew I had to change something. And that was the day when I came home to the house I was living at. You see, my son and I had left my abusive husband about a year before that, and we were living somewhere else. And I came home and I found a business card tucked into the side of the door, and it said coroner's unit, robbery unit. And my heart sank, and I thought, oh boy, here we go. So I knew that it was in regards to my soon-to-be ex-husband, and he unfortunately had just spiraled down further and further and further after we left, while I was trying to journey ourselves to healing. And so he had developed a gambling habit, addiction, and he had already been to jail once for stealing from a casino. So I kind of had an idea on what this might be about. But to be honest, when I actually called the number and got on the phone, it was way more than that.
Oh my goodness.
And I was just floored. And so when I dialed the number, the other person on the line introduced himself as an FBI agent. And he went on to tell me that my former husband was wanted for multiple bank robberies for the past 6 to 9 months. And he said, are you aware of his whereabouts? And I said, I didn't know what to say. And so he said, well, I don't need your corroboration, but can I just come talk to you? And so he came over the next morning, and he brought his little briefcase with him, and it had all the bank photos. And so he put them out on the table, and there he was. I can totally recognize him even in his hat and stuff like that. Yeah. I knew that was him because it was the t-shirt that I had bought him for Father's Day. It was the hat that we wore, shared, and when we would vacation in Mexico. So it was clearly him. And so, like I said, the agent didn't need my corroboration or anything. So he went on to tell me of all the different dates, times, locations, and I could not write them all down. It was so many. And I was just trying to hope that my brain would somehow connect, like somehow, how can this make sense?
Right.
I felt like I was in this surreal world. And so anyway,
Yeah. Everything just stops in that moment. Like
exactly.
clearly you can remember every little detail of what
Yeah,
happened in those they're like etched in your brain. It's a trauma, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I realized that all of those bank robberies were done after a supervised visit that he had had with our son. And so
Oh.
I just felt so thankful that he was not apprehended when he had my son with him.
Mhm.
So he did, they did apprehend him, and he went to prison for probably 7 or 8 years. And then he got out on parole when my son was in junior high. And he then became a missing person about a year after he had been out, because he started doing some other crimes. And so that turned into 2 years. And I remember the US Marshal telling me, "Oh, I'll find him probably in like 2 weeks. This is what I
Oh,
do." And so 2 weeks passed, months passed, a year passed, and they couldn't find him. Well, finally they did, but that was 2 years later.
wow.
And
So
the
you're
only
just
reason
living in terror the whole time, right?
I didn't
Wondering
know what was
when he's going to
happening.
show up.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't know. And then I would have like different people calling me, like a detective and Marshall, "Ma'am, we don't have any leads. Do you have any ideas of where he might be?" That
Mm.
kind of thing. It just drop in my lap one day while I'm trying to go about my business. So anyway, unfortunately, he started robbing banks again. So the FBI got involved, and they have way more resources. So they were able to locate him. So he is now in prison again, and will most likely get out next year, because it's been another 7 years or so.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah,
Wow.
when that
Wow.
happened, I just realized, okay, like this is a whole nother level, like
Mhm.
before that, we're talking abuse and all of that, which is horrible in itself.
Yeah.
But now we're talking criminal level,
Yeah.
FBI level. Like, I don't know who else he might owe money to, who else he got involved with.
Right.
Do they know where we live? So
Right.
this
Right.
is a very high elevation. And so I knew, as time went on, I started getting more freaked out and feeling really vulnerable. And I
Mhm.
just thought, you know what? I'm tired of feeling this way. And, you
Mm.
know, more traumas would come from him. Even in prison, he'd try to drag us into court
Mhm.
and get my son to come visit him there. So there
Mm.
was more and more and more. And I finally got tired of it. And so the way that I became empowered to change the scenario was I started learning self-defense,
Mhm.
because I wanted to be able to protect myself and my son, because there were instances where I would call the police and it would take them 20 minutes to show up. Well, the incident's already over, you know?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so I finally realized, okay, it's up to me, basically, because
Yeah.
I can't always have, my dad with me or my dog or whatnot. So I need to be able to protect myself and
Right.
help. At that point, my son was little. So I started learning self-defense and just taking like a weekend workshop. And then I
Mhm.
found a mentor who was super gnarly. That in itself, you know, learning from like a gnarly person. So that's why I decided over the pandemic, how nice would it be for women to learn from a woman
Mm.
this type of, stuff. And I
Right.
just felt, honestly, like I just kind of felt like a jerk keeping it to myself, because I'm like, I have learned so many good things. Like, I have
Yeah.
so much to share.
Yeah.
And from woman to woman or women to teen, like it doesn't feel quite as scary from
Yeah.
like a big gnarly dude who.
Yeah.
So that's just what I've started helping with.
Wow. That is the definition of a warrior parent right there
Yeah.
in a badass kind of way.
Yeah.
And I
Right,
never, the
right,
funny
but
thing is, like, I don't ever consider myself a badass or whatever. Like, I'm
yeah.
not, I'm just a mom. Like, I'm a regular
Yeah,
woman.
yeah,
So, you know,
Yeah. And a warrior.
and a
yeah,
warrior.
yeah.
So did you start teaching classes then on all the things that you had learned?
Yeah. I just, started teaching my friends and then teaching other people. And I just came up with a course that kind of went over the basics, and then
Mhm.
would do some in-person types of workshops and help. But to be honest, like, a lot of self-defense is really mindset, and it's starting with um, being aware of your surroundings, because the whole
Yes.
goal is not getting into an
To a
altercation,
situation.
right?
Yes,
Right.
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 So that's really what I focus on. And so the in-person's like, yes, I'll teach a couple moves, but it's like so much more than that. So that's what I like to
Yeah,
focus on.
yeah. I feel like, so not to give too much information, but I grew up in a situation that was not always safe for me, at a very young age. So I always have this hypersensitivity, if you will, to my surroundings.
Mm,
And so it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. So as being hypersensitive all the time can really take your body down, your adrenals, your thyroid. Like, eventually I ended up getting really, really sick. But it served me as a woman to be, because I was in the medical field, I was on the road a lot, like 5 days a week. And
mhm,
so always had this keen awareness. I would never get in the car unless the gas tank was full. I would
mhm,
I would never stay on the bottom floor of a hotel room. I would the people who did my travel knew I would only stay in certain hotels. I would
mhm.
never arrive in a hotel room at night.
Yep.
That mean I had was very, very specific about how I got around.
Wow.
And again, it's just that's the first piece, is having that sort of sensitivity,
Mhm,
as a woman. And I feel like
mhm.
those are the things I tried to teach my kids as well,
Right.
especially my daughter.
Yeah, that's important. And I'm sorry that you had that experience, when you were a child. And like you mentioned, I talk about this a lot, about listening to our intuition, but not being too hyper vigilant, because
Hmm.
when you're too hyper vigilant, it's like everything's an emergency and you
Yeah.
can't really pay attention to the things you need to pay attention to. So
Yes.
a lot of times I'll talk about some grounding ways where we
Mm,
can calmly notice our surroundings, because we don't want to be hyper vigilant all the time.
Yeah. That is really that I feel like that's a really important point because I know personally I've had times where I'm like, okay, I got to listen to my intuition, but I can just go down, especially when my kids were teenagers, and
Hmm.
particularly my older son, who just he was just always kind of out there doing stuff that felt really dangerous, and so I could really like I'd be like, oh, he wasn't home, and he was maybe staying somewhere that I didn't love, but he was old enough, and I could go down this rabbit hole of, okay, what's my instinct saying? Oh my God. I mean, I remember once in the middle of the night making my husband call him because I got myself so worked up.
Oh
And he's
no.
asleep, and he wakes up and he's like, what? And I was like, Frank's like, he's asleep. Oh, just checking on you, honey, And then I was like, okay, that wasn't really helpful. But I had convinced myself that somehow I had a psychic connection and that something bad was happening and we needed to reach out. And I couldn't even do it. I had to have my husband do it because I was like, it is going to be so bad. I can't even.
Oh
And
God.
he's just sleeping. So that's how do you have some tips for someone like me, for anyone, or how do you navigate that? Like, do you have some really practical advice that you could share with our audience?
Well, I remember with my son too, it's like once they get their driver's license, and they get that freedom, it's just like,
Yeah,
oh my gosh, like I have no control anymore.
seriously.
Right.
no.
Yes.
And so I remember for us, that was a contention point, because he got his license and he was like, woohoo, freedom. I'm out of
Yep.
here, guys.
Yep.
I'm going to LA with my friends. And we were like, what? Uh, no. So, so that was super tricky.
Yeah.
Um,
Marci grew
so
up grew up in LA
Oh
driving on the
gosh.
I
freeway.
totally
Yeah.
related to what you just said because I
Yeah.
was living in Huntington Beach and I got my
Oh.
license. I was like, yep, going to LA with my friends. But
Yeah.
parents were a little less helicoptery back then. So they were just
Yes.
like, whatever, and off I
Right.
was.
Right.
But
Things were different. Yeah.
Yeah.
we're different.
Exactly. Yeah. So with him, like I just there were a couple different things. So, one was we had set up a code word that we would all know, just my husband, I'm remarried, and my son and myself. So just we would know that code word. And I told my son, hey, if you're ever anywhere that you need me, like now, then you could text me or call me and just use that code word. Like in your normal conversation, we picked up a word that would flow like that. So that way, if you're with somebody that could hear that, they would not have any idea what that meant. And so we had, the find me phone thingy so we could see where he was.
Yeah.
I still track my kids.
Yeah.
My son's 25 and a pilot, and I'm like, oh, he's in Chicago, he's in Florida.
Funny.
I follow him over. He probably doesn't know I do that.
Yeah.
He does now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Funny.
I love that. That's really brilliant. Just that communication piece and empowering him to, no matter what situation he's in, that he has something he can go to.
Right. Right. So that helped. And then to be honest, like after, gosh, I don't remember exactly what age it was, but I just realized at some point I need to let go. I need to let go and I need to trust God to take care of my kid. And I am going to trust that I have taught him everything that I could teach him. I've given him a code word, and I needed to let go. And that brought me so much peace, to be honest.
That right there that you just said, that is so important. And I think for parents who are in those teen years and getting to that point where, where they're approaching adulthood, it's tough and yet it's so important. And when you do get there, and again, with that, like you said, you trust that you taught them well. And that's really great.
And it is a different world, right? Like we're like Marci and I we're probably much older than you, but when we were kids, like we just ran around. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, but it was just like, be home by dark. And
same with us.
That was it. Nobody knew, we didn't have phones, right?
Nope.
Of course. Yeah.
So this whole, find me on the phone thing is a really an interesting thing. It's a good thing and a bad thing for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about your son and how he has coped with all of this, and maybe besides that tool, what are some of the other discussions that you might have because of your situation?
Right. So we left when he was 3, so he was still pretty little. But throughout that whole time, he had visits with his dad, usually supervised. And even now, like he has communication with his dad. They'll do phone calls or emails. And from the get-go, I determined that I would never badmouth my former husband about him to my son.
Right.
Because I figured, like, my son can see, my son sees that he's in prison. That says something. And so I let my son come to his own conclusion. So that was important. And then I remember at the beginning, how difficult it was when we left. And of course, my son and I got counseling, and more so me, because, he was so young. And to be honest, I was doing a speaking engagement the other day, and people asked me, like, what was the best thing you did to help your son? And I answered with, honestly, the best thing I did for my son was taking care of myself.
Yes.
And it was getting the counseling I needed and unraveling the trauma, and becoming a healthy person myself.
Yes.
And I remember too asking my counselor, like, how do I help him? And she said, well, right now things are out of control for him. So he needs to feel like he has control over something. And so she said, make sure he can choose his clothes for the day, make sure he can choose what he wants to eat. He gets to choose the flavor ice cream, just make as many choices as he can for himself.
Mhm.
And then I remember, trying to get him counseling when he got older, and it was difficult. So I'm sure a lot of your listeners are running into that as well.
Yes.
And
Or finding a counselor, even if
yeah,
they
totally.
want one or can't
Totally.
afford it,
Yes,
right?
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So I remember for us, luckily my counselor was married to a male counselor. And so he would see my son, and they would actually, because at this time we lived kind of closer to the beach. So he would walk with my son down to the beach. And that was super helpful because, as you know, kids don't want to sit in a counseling office and look at a
Yeah.
counselor and
Yeah.
tell them all their stuff, right? They want to move. They want to move. So
Yeah.
that was really helpful. And then, of course, as you all well know, all the good conversations with your own kids come in the car, right? When you're driving. It's
Yeah.
not when you sit them down and say, hey, we need to have a conversation, and you're staring at them across the table, right?
Yeah.
That makes them so uncomfortable. So it's being in the car, or, when my husband and son and I, sometimes when he got older, we would go on hikes together. That's when he'd start talking about stuff. So I'm preaching to the choir here already. You guys know that, but that helped my son as well. And I'm kind of skipping around back to when he was younger and older as I'm remembering different things. But when he was younger, I remember telling him, like, hey, what's happening with your dad, it really might not be like appropriate to share with your buddies, because they're not going to understand that. But you're more than welcome to talk about it, like, with your teachers and any adults, our family, grandpa and grandma, whoever you want to. They're really good people to talk to about this if you want to. But with your friends, not that we're trying to keep it a secret, but they're not really going to understand this. They don't know the whole story. So just letting him know that, and letting him know that also throughout as he was growing up, please talk to somebody about this. It doesn't have to be me. I'm here for you anytime, but please, like, talk to your youth group leader, talk to your teacher. Now that you're older and things are different, talk with your friends, make sure that you get it out and you're talking about how you're feeling. That was really important.
Yeah. Processing. Yeah. There's something else I want to share with our listeners, kind of based on what you talked about with the walking and talking with the therapist. A couple of things. One is just being out in nature has that calming effect on the nervous system. And then the second is walking, which is basically bilateral tapping. That left foot, right foot, back and forth is calming on the nervous system. So it's just all putting him in a place where he's feeling less fight or flight and more I'm safe, and now I can share. So yeah, so many levels that's
Yes.
helpful.
Yeah. And when I do my talks, my presentations to schools, especially, I always emphasize, because the kids want to know, like, that's a crazy story, Miss Mandi. How did you get through that? How are you okay? And that's one of the things I always tell them, was I spent so much time in nature, and I still do, because that is such a grounding force for me. So I spend a lot of time in nature, especially when I'm not, feeling so great. I will take a break and I will go outside and I will walk around the park, because, and not just walk and be checking emails.
No.
Right.
No.
Right.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we Marci's like the grounding guru, but man, I am seeing grounding everywhere now. I don't know, there's like grounding sheets. There's people are sleeping on magnets. I mean, we have realized that we all those things that surround us every day, we need those things. I was reading some article about animals, and how animals are automatically grounded. They don't have, the rubber soles in their shoes. They're connected to the ground all the time. And I found that fascinating. And all of what fills our cells and our energy comes from the earth, right? Either from just the ground itself, or the air we breathe, or
Mhm.
the water, the waves, the rhythm, like all those things, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Get outside. That's what I say that to my younger son, who, has a lot of anxiety and depression. And, when he's really getting down, I'll say, did you go out yet? Have you gone outside and taken your shoes off, or just sit under a tree? And I think he now understands. Sometimes we need it, we need that to point it out. So you have the
Mhm.
awareness that you're like, oh, this works for me, just like what works for you. And everybody's got to find the things that work for them. But boy, that's a great place to start.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I know you have lots of other tools, and there's other things that you talk about. What was it? The 10 things that you have to stay safe. You have one, and then Marci was just listening to one of your podcasts. It was about 20 things
22 college safety tips to avoid
Mhm.
an attack. That's
Yeah.
from your
Right.
podcast, which is called Women Aware
Women
and
aware and
Prepared.
prepared. Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you share a few of those tips with our
Sure.
audience?
Yeah. This is a pop quiz testing my memory.
No, you don't
This
have to
is
go through
good.
all 20. I mean, like maybe 5 or something.
Okay.
I always people would get overwhelmed.
Yeah. Um, well, one thing, okay, I would say, especially for the college age and teenager
Yeah.
age group, as well as our age group, honestly, the easiest thing to do is to not keep your head down looking at your phone when
Mm,
you're out, right?
yeah.
So when I'm out walking my dog, I'm never checking my phone, my email, nothing.
Mhm.
I'm paying attention. And when I go shopping and I come back to my car, that's not when I check my phone. That's not when I check my emails.
Mhm.
Because, when you think about it, if you're shopping and you get there, nobody's seen you yet, right? You're new to the scene. But when you've been shopping and you come back to your car, um, people may have seen you parked there, right? And so when you come back, you need to be paying attention.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of teenagers ask me, like, do I need to look under the car? Remember, like, we heard about the guy who slashes your ankle. And I'm like, okay, you don't have to be hyper vigilant. I don't even like look under the car. I'm just paying attention. I'm not on my phone.
Yeah.
I kind of glance in the back of my car as I'm getting into my front door.
Yeah.
So one thing that also is an easy fix is your door locks. So when you're out and you're pumping gas, and you've got your driver's door open, you can lock your doors so somebody can't get into the other doors.
Mhm.
And then when you come back from shopping, right, and you're coming back to your car, I noticed that I used to just hit my fob and just unlock, because you never know if it works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that unlocks all the doors. So I don't recommend that. So you just want to unlock your door if you're by yourself, right?
Mm.
Because if they're all unlocked and you're getting into your car door, well, somebody who was over there you didn't see maybe, or in the car next door, can just quickly hop into the passenger side if that
Mm.
door's not locked, right?
Yeah.
So I always pay attention to my door locks. And speaking of doors too, like when I come back from walking my dog, I pay attention to what's behind me as I'm coming back in. Again, I'm not freaked out like who's behind me? I'm not
Mhm.
freaked out like that. I'm just
Aware.
generally calmly like coming in the door, and she twists me around anyway with the leash, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just coming around and I'm looking behind me as I'm shutting the door, because I don't obviously want any surprises that way. And let's see what else. Oh, a lot of people don't think about using your voice.
Mm.
That's a self-defense tool that's always on you. And I know, like, as women or girls, like we're taught to be nice and give everybody the benefit of the doubt and be people pleasers. Well, you know, we need to let our kids especially know that you don't have to please everybody and be nice to everybody all the time. If you see somebody where your intuition is like, that doesn't look right, or that doesn't feel right for some reason, you don't need to be nice. And so if you're at the gas station and somebody's approaching you and you're like, whoa, 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 like, what is this? Right. You don't wait until they're next to you. Before they get close enough, which is way before you think, you can put your hand out and yell, stop, you know, don't come any closer. And when you use your voice and you use it really loud, that makes people go, whoa, like, okay, I'm not going to choose, this lady's crazy or something, like, you know,
well,
this
and it
lady's
alerts
loud.
it alerts all the people around you.
Exactly.
Right. So they're now watching. Right.
Right. So the goal is to become a harder target, right? So walking, even like when you're walking, and even when I'm walking my dog, like I don't walk looking down and looking meek, right? I walk with my shoulders back and my head up. And I'm walking like, I mean, business. And if I see somebody, I'm going to make eye contact with them. That doesn't mean give them a dirty look or anything like that.
Right.
It's just, you know, I'm looking in their eyes. I've seen them, and then I look on to the trees behind them or something. And so it's because there's quite a few studies that have been done, but one in particular, they asked all of the criminals that were in that prison, and they asked them, hey, how did you choose your targets? And they all came up with the same conclusions, that they chose somebody who was distracted. They chose somebody who didn't look confident. Right. Those are just a couple of the things. And so that's another quick and easy way. And now I know that like a lot of kids or even women are shy, like we're introverts. I was very shy when I was younger. And so for me to walk like with my head up and look at somebody in the eye was like a big deal, but it's important. And you can just, you know, practice, like maybe, so I always say like baby steps. What's the next baby step you could do? Maybe it's just shoulders back and looking ahead, right? And then eventually you can work up to making eye contact just really quick, you know. So yeah, those are some important things.
That's very practical and helpful. And, you know, I feel like I want to just make it clear, although hopefully everyone hears that this isn't about victim shaming or saying that it's your fault.
No,
it's about empowering people to show up in a way that it gives them agency in this to be less likely. It doesn't mean that, you know, you could do all this stuff and you might end up still being a victim. And obviously it's not your fault in any case, but we do, like, the more tools we have, the better we show up in the world. And some tools are for calming and some are for empowering.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm so glad that you said that. And I always like to say too, that we only know what we know when we know it. Right. So a lot of us that are our age, like we may have had something happen to us in the past. Well, in our age, we didn't get taught this stuff. So we didn't know.
No.
Like, you know, like I ended up married to an abuser. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know. So I don't shame myself about that, you know?
Right. Yeah. And like you said, in my generation, we were taught to be kind and sweet and make it easy on everyone else. And I've had to really work to unlearn a lot of that, to use my voice, like you say, because the thought of someone walking up towards me and me putting my hand up and saying, stop, that's close enough. Like that terrifies me. And yet, why should that terrify me? I'm entitled to space. I'm entitled to speaking up for myself.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to unlearn, is that idea that I got to make everybody else comfortable.
Right.
Even if I'm super uncomfortable in the process.
I know. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of us feel that way. And I had to get over that too, because I was, you know, super shy, like people pleaser. You know, I didn't want to rock the boat. And I still, I don't like confrontation, of course. Like how many of us like that? But I also don't want to be like attacked or even in a situation where, you know, so anyway,
Well, I think the moral of the story is that women are feeling empowered. And I know for Marci and I, this podcast in itself has given us a voice that we probably never really knew that we had.
That's
and
awesome.
we
Yeah.
feel our voices getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And it feels nice to be heard. It feels nice to be witnessed. And I'm pretty sure you're feeling the same thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, with that, I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
But I know Marci always asks the question, how can we find out more about Mandi Pratt? I know you've written a book. How do we get access to you and your resources?
Well, the easiest way would be to go to my website, womanawareandprepared.com. And that has everything, my book about pepper spray. So I wrote that book and put it up on Amazon because when I was learning from the gnarly mentor, right, he's teaching me knives and guns and, and I'm like, but I'm a woman. Like, we want to know about pepper spray. Does it work or not?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I couldn't find what I was looking for. So I went and researched all of it. I talked with a doctor and a lawyer and my mentor. And so I put that together. So it's just an easy, like, if you buy pepper spray, you should have that book, or at least look up some, some of those things, because it
Yeah.
has an
Right.
expiration date. There's different types, there's a bunch of things to know. Anyway, so that's on my website, as well as my podcast. That's also on my website, Women Aware and Prepared. And then my speaking and my course. I don't run my course that often anymore, unless I get a request. So a lot of times I'll have a group of like moms and daughters that want to do that together.
Mhm.
And so that's easy to do. We just meet via Zoom,
Mhm.
like a Tuesday and a Thursday for 2 hours each time, and it's done.
That's awesome. Lots of great resources for people.
And I forgot to say, yes, that list of 10 things, 10 quick things you can do to keep yourself safer. They'll see that if they go to the website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well,
All
thank you
right.
so much, Mandi. It's been so great to talk with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thanks.
it's our pleasure.
Thanks for your authenticity. It's much appreciated.
And now for a moment about meditation and how it can help you and your family to self-regulate and mindfully return to a place of calm and centeredness. Our Core Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. Meditation is just one of these powerful tools. And through a special partnership with Donna Appadoni, we have created a group of meditations available only on our platform and via Donna's own website. Here's Donna.
I connect with those around me. I take them into my heart as they pass by. Trees, people, animals, every living thing. Hi, I'm Donna Appadoni. I'm the person who writes and produces meditations for this podcast and for the Core Experience app. What happens when somebody gives you a compliment or says something nice to you? You feel good, right? It adds to your confidence. You stand up a little bit taller. And you immediately want to say something nice or pay a compliment to the next person. Do it. Just do it. And don't limit it to people. You can say something nice or pay a compliment to a dog or a cat. You can say something nice about a blue sky. You can say something nice about rain or snow that's falling. Find the good in everyone and in everything, and you'll make the world a nicer place. Remember, whatever's happening with you right now, you can do anything you set your mind to do. I feel a shift. Is that tree a little taller? Is that person a little nicer? Does that animal look like she's smiling? Or is it just me?
Donna's book, called Drive Time Meditations, is a collection of 183 of her purpose-driven motivators. Drive Time Meditations is available on Amazon.
Thank you for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast. You can find us at coreexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Our meditation segment is produced by Donna Appadone with music from Scott Holmes. The full collection of meditations is in Donna's book, Drive Time Meditations, available on Amazon and at donnaappadone.com. Thanks to Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Beeden. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, producers, or financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. The Warrior Parent Podcast is a production of Core Experience. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you.